Great. I will begin chapter 1 now. This will be a full 2,000 word, smooth flowing storytelling chapter rooted in old African traditions carried to early African American communities. Warm, magical, atmospheric, bedtime friendly but engaging. No headings inside the chapter. When you're ready for chapter 2, just say next chapter, chapter 1, about 2,000 words. The night in Willow Bend always arrives softly, like a grandmother folding a blanket over a sleeping child. Shadows slipped between the crooked wooden houses, and fireflies lit the dusty road with their tiny lantern bellies. The warm air smelled of sweet grass and the distant smoke from the cooking fires that dotted the slope of the settlement. It was a night that felt older than the trees, older than the earth under them, because tonight was the kind of night when stories walked with the living. Little Kofi sat cross-legged on the porch of his grandmother's cabin, chin propped on his hands as he watched the fireflies blink in the yard. Grandma Amma had told him to wait while she prepared something special, and Kofi knew better than to rush her. She was not like the other adults in Willow Bend. She carried a softness in her voice and a storm in her eyes, and when she spoke, the air itself seemed to lean closer. Her stories were not just stories. They were living things that curled around your feet and settled into your bones. Inside the cabin, he could hear her wooden spoon clicking against the pot, the herbs rustling as she crushed them, and the quiet hum of a song older than anyone in town remembered. Kofi didn't know the words, but he knew the melody. His grandmother called it a song of the old place, the land her ancestors came from Africa long before she or even her parents were born in America. She said the song wasn't just for singing. It was for opening doors between worlds. Tonight, she told him, one of those doors might swing open. Kofi swallowed. He wasn't scared exactly, but he wasn't not scared either. Just then, the front door creaked open, and Grandma Amma stepped out, leaning on her carved cane. Her gray hair was wrapped in a cloth printed with faded symbols Kofi never understood but loved looking at. Her skin was the warm, deep brown of polished wood, and when she smiled, her eyes glimmered like coals that hadn't yet lost their heat. "Come, child," she said, motioning him inside. "Tonight we honor the ones who walked before us. And when we honor them, they come close enough to whisper." Kofi stood quickly and hurried into the cabin. Inside, the room felt different. The lamps were dim low, and the floor was swept clean. A bowl of water sat near the window, reflecting the moonlight. A ring of herbs lay around it: sage, sweetgrass, and something sharper he couldn't name. He knew this setup. It was the same one she made every year on story night, a night when families across Willow Bend told tales from their past, from Africa, from the old generations who carried their traditions through darkness. But Grandma Amma never told the same story twice, and the stories she told felt too vivid, too real, as if she wasn't creating them, but remembering them. "Sit," she said, lowering herself into her rocking chair. Kofi sat in front of her, legs tucked under him, heart thumping with excitement. Grandma Amma took a slow breath, and when she exhaled, her voice dropped into that deep, warm rhythm that signaled the story was about to begin. "There is a story," she said, "that was first told under the red moons of the Asante lands. A story carried in the hearts of your great-great-great-grandmothers, even when they were far from home. It is about a boy who was not so different from you." Kofi leaned in. "This boy's name was Jabare," she continued. "And though he was young, he carried something in him, something the elders saw even before he did. And the world he lived in held more magic than ours. But only if you listened closely." Kofi nodded slowly, letting her words pull him into the world she was weaving. Grandma Amma closed her eyes, letting the memory settle. Jabari lived not far from where the great baobab tree rose from the red earth like an elder watching over the village. And in that tree, she said, lowering her voice, something lived. Something ancient. Kofi shivered with anticipation. One night, she went on, Jabari woke to the sound of drums soft, distant drums calling him out of his bed. At first, he thought it was a dream. But dreams fade. This sound grew stronger. As she spoke, Kofi imagined himself lying on a straw mat under a wide African sky. Hearing drums calling him like a heartbeat, Jabari rose quietly, she said, slipped past his sleeping brothers, and walked into the night. The drums didn't frighten him, they felt like home. They led him to the base of the baobab tree, whose branches twisted like fingers reaching toward the stars. She paused, letting the tension settle, and there, beneath the tree, a soft light pulsed from a crack in the bark, as if the tree itself was breathing. Jabari stepped closer, and as he did, a voice spoke. The cabin creaked softly, as if listening. It said, "Little one, you carry the courage of your ancestors. So why do you tremble?" Kofi's eyes widened. The voice belonged to Kwaku Anance. Kofi's breath caught. He knew that name. Every child in Willow Bend had heard of Anance, the trickster spider spirit. Clever, mischievous, sometimes helpful, sometimes dangerous. Grandma Emma said Anance had traveled with their ancestors across the ocean and lived in their stories now, popping out whenever a tale needed teaching. Jabari froze. She continued. He had heard of Anance all his life, but never believed he would meet him. The light grew brighter, and slowly, from the crack in the tree, emerged a small spider with a glint in its eyes that looked far too knowing. The wind outside rustled the walls, and Kofi shivered. Anance asked him, "Do you know why the drums called you?" Jabari shook his head. The spider circled him slowly. "There is something you must do," Anance said. "A darkness has come silent and creeping. And though you are small, you have been chosen to face it." Kofi swallowed hard. "Why him?" he whispered before realizing he had spoken aloud. Grandma Amma smiled. "That is what Jabari wondered. But sometimes, child, the ancestors see in us what we cannot yet see." She continued. Anance jumped onto Jabari's shoulder and whispered a story one older than the baobab tree. Older even than the land itself. A story of a shadow creature called the Night Eater. It was said to move with the wind, feeding on courage, draining whole villages of hope. And it had awakened. The fire crackled louder. Kofi's heart raced. Anance told Jabari that this creature had crossed into his world. All the signs were there. The silence in the forest, the absence of birdsong, the strange cold in the wind. Grandma Emma leaned forward, and so, the drums had called him. Jabari wanted to run, she said softly. He was only a boy. But Anance whispered, "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is stepping forward. Even when fear walks beside you." That line settled heavily into Kofi's chest. So Jabari agreed to follow the drums, she said. And as soon as the words left his mouth, the world shifted. The dusty red earth grew darker, the stars swirled like stirred water, and the baobab tree opened like a doorway. Kofi gasped. "Yes," Grandma Amma whispered. The tree had been waiting for him. Inside was a tunnel of roots, winding downward, glowing faintly with the spirits of ancestors who whispered his name. Jabari felt their warmth, their strength. With each step he took, the fear shrank. Her voice deepened. At the end of the tunnel, Jabari found himself at the edge of a great plain. In the distance, he saw the Night Eater tall, shapeless, like a shadow ripped from the earth. It had no face, only a gaping mouth of darkness. Kofi pressed a hand to his chest. Jabari trembled, she said, but he remembered Anance's words. The ancestors' whispers grew louder, filling him with a heat like fire in his heart. She paused, letting the room go silent, Then he did something the Night Eater did not expect. Her eyes glimmered. He sang, "What song?" Kofi whispered, "A song his grandmother taught him," she said. "A song of protection. A song that carried generations of strength." And she began humming it, the same ancient tune she'd been singing in the kitchen earlier. It wrapped around the room like warm smoke, filling Kofi with a deep, soothing comfort. When Jabari sang, she went on, the darkness faltered. The shadow creature shrank back, confused. It fed on fear, not courage. And Jabari's voice carried the courage of all who came before him. The fire popped loudly. The Night Eater shrieked, shrinking into a thin wisp of smoke that fled into the sky. The plain brightened. The baobab roots pulled him back. When he stepped outside again, the sky was blue with dawn. The drums had stopped, and Anand's had vanished. Kofi let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Jabari ran home," she said softly. And though he told no one what he had seen, the elders later said they felt the air grow lighter, the world warmer. They knew a burden had lifted, and they knew someone brave had helped guide the night away. She leaned back in her chair, and from that day, she finished, Jabari walked with more certainty. Not because he had forgotten fear, but because he understood it. The ancestors had chosen him, and courage had answered. The cabin fell quiet. Outside, the fireflies blinked in slow rhythm. Kofi stared at his grandmother, chest full, mind racing with images of red earth, glowing trees, and a boy who discovered his own strength. Grandma Amma smiled softly. "Our stories travel with us, child. Across oceans, across time, even across darkness. And tonight," she tapped his chest gently, "this one found you." Kofi nodded, feeling a warmth spread through him. She rocked once, twice, and said, "That is enough for one night." But Kofi knew it wasn't the end. Not of the story. Not of Jabari. And certainly not of the world where shadows lived and courage fought back. He swallowed, eyes bright. "Grandma," he whispered, "can you tell me more tomorrow?" Her smile deepened. "If the ancestors allow," she said, and the fireflies outside blinked, as if they had already agreed. Asterisk understood. I will now deliver chapter 2, about 2,000 words. Storytelling style, no headings. If you want chapter 3, just say free. Chapter 2, approximately 2,000 words. The next evening in Willow Bend carried a different kind of quiet one that seemed to hum underneath the air, like something waiting to be spoken aloud. The crickets chirped slower, the wind breathed warmer, and even the fireflies blinked as if they knew a story was about to unfold again. Kofi finished his chores faster than usual. He swept the porch, brought in the firewood, and even helped his mother fold the laundry without being asked twice. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted toward Grandma Anna's cabin. The memory of last night's tale still lived in his chest, pulsing like a heartbeat that didn't belong only to him. He felt as if Jabari's courage had reached across time and tapped him on the shoulder when the sun finally slid behind the distant pines, painting the sky in streaks of purple and gold. Kofi couldn't wait any longer. He rushed to his grandmother's porch and knocked. Though the door was already open, "Come in, child," her voice floated from inside. Warm as always, Kofi stepped in and immediately sensed something different. The bowl of water was still by the window, but tonight the water glowed faintly, as if moonlight had sunk into its depths. A single candle burned in the corner, its flame bending and dancing even though there was no breeze. The room smelled of sage again, but also something sweeter, something like honeyed smoke. Grandma Amma sat in her rocking chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap. But she watched him with an expression that wasn't quite her usual smile, gentler, deeper, almost proud. "You came quickly," she said. Kofi swallowed. "I was waiting." She chuckled softly. I know you were. The ancestors whispered it to me before sunset. He blinked. Really? Stories travel ahead of us, she said. Sometimes faster than our feet. He sat before her, excitement buzzing through him like fireflies trapped in his ribs. Will you tell me what happened to Jabari next? He asked Dot. She nodded slowly. Yes, the story isn't done. In fact, she leaned forward, lowering her voice. Last night was the beginning. Tonight, the real test begins. Kofi's pulse quickened. She took a breath. And as always, the world seemed to soften around her words. After Jabari defeated the Night Eater, she began. He thought the danger had passed. He thought the drums had called him for only one night. But courage, child. Her eyes glimmered. Courage attracts its own challenges. The rocking chair creaked gently. Many days passed in Jabari's village. Life returned to normal, or at least it seemed to. The birds sang again in the morning, and the wind grew playful, curling through the grass like a laughing spirit. But Jabari felt something shifting inside him, a warmth he didn't understand, a strength he wasn't used to feeling. Kofi nodded slowly, imagining that boy waking up each morning with a new kind of fire in his chest. He kept hearing faint echoes of the old drums. She continued, but only in his dreams. And each time, he saw the baobab tree glowing in the distance, as if calling him back. He tried to ignore it, thinking perhaps the ancestors were simply reminding him of the courage he had shown. But one night, she said softly, everything changed again. She paused to let the silence settle. It began with the stars. Kofi blinked. The stars? Yes, that night they flickered, every single one like candles caught in a sudden wind. The village elders noticed it first. They stepped out of their homes and looked toward the sky, murmuring in worry. And the animals? Even they sensed something. The goats bleated nervously. The dogs whined. The forest grew so quiet that even the leaves seemed to hold their breath. Kofi leaned forward, captivated. But Jabari did not wake to the sound of drums this time. He woke to a whisper. She tapped her cane lightly on the floor, a whisper that came from outside his window, a whisper that knew his name. Kofi hugged his knees. Jabari sat up slowly. She continued, listening to the voice that drifted through the slats of the wall. It wasn't Anan's. It wasn't any elder. And it wasn't human. Her voice dropped an octave. It was the voice of the baobab tree. Kofi felt goosebumps rise on his arms. The tree said, Child of the Red Earth, you must come. Jabari slipped out of bed, careful not to wake his family, and stepped out into the moonlit night. The wind was colder than it had been in years. He followed the voice, his bare feet moving silently over the dirt path. She nodded slowly, and there, standing at the roots of the baobab tree, was a woman. Kofi's eyes widened. She wasn't from the village. Her clothes were woven from leaves and shadows. Her skin glowed like moonlit clay, and her hair flowed down her back in long braids that shimmered like threads of silver. Was she a spirit? Kofi whispered, double quotes, yes, Grandma Amma said. One of the oldest. Her name was Yadisia, the guardian of the living roots. Kofi felt the name settle into the room like a warm breath. She looked at Jabari with eyes full of centuries, and she told him the truth. The Night Eater had been only a small part of a greater darkness. Something older, something more patient. The candle flame flickered violently for a moment, then steadied. Yanxia told him that deep within the earth lived a creature called the Whispering Hollow. It had been sleeping for generations, feeding on the quiet, feeding on secrets. But the world had grown too loud with fear carried on ships. Fear carried across oceans, fear carried by people who were taken far from their homelands. Kofi swallowed. He knew this part, the part where the ancestors were forced onto ships. But his grandmother didn't speak it directly. She let it sit between her words, heavy but gentle. The Whispering Hollow, she continued, fed on the sorrow of those journeys. It grew in the silence of chained nights and forgotten prayers. And now it had awakened. The air in the room seemed to chill. Yanxia told Jabari that the creature had begun spreading its influence. Not like the Night Eater, which devoured courage in the open. This one hid in the quiet spaces of the mind. It planted whispers, doubts, fears, shadows. If left alone, it would grow strong enough to dim the spirit of an entire people. Kofi felt a heaviness in his chest. So Jabari had to stop it? Yes, she said, but not alone. She smiled faintly. The ancestors had already chosen others. Kofi lifted his head. Others? Yes, children like Jabari. Brave hearts scattered across many lands. Some born in Africa, some born across the ocean in new places where old traditions still lived in memory. Kofi caught his breath. He knew what she meant. The children of enslaved Africans, the ones who kept the stories alive even when the world tried to silence them. In Jabari's time, she continued. The guardian of living roots called 3 other children from nearby villages. A girl named Adwoa, swift as the wind. A boy named Kanto, strong as carved stone. And a quiet child named Ceci, who could hear the voices of the trees. Kofi's eyes widened in awe. When they came together, she said, Jabari felt something shift. For the first time, he realized courage wasn't meant to be carried alone. She nodded softly, but the Whispering Hollow knew they were coming, and shadows began to move beneath their feet. The wind outside brushed softly against the window, as if listening closely. Yeah. Zia led the 4 children to the sacred clearing where the old stories said the world first breathed. The land there looked ancient, untouched by time. The grass shimmered as though lit from within. The air thrummed with energy. Kofi imagined the place, feeling its weight and wonder. But as they stepped forward, she said quietly, the ground beneath them cracked. Cracked? Kofi tensed. A long fissure split open, she continued, and a low voice rose from the darkness below. A voice shaped by centuries of quiet suffering. Kofi could almost hear it vibrating through the floor. The voice said, courage. How fragile it is. Come closer, children. Come closer and let me taste your doubt. Kofi's fingers curled into the edge of his shirt. Jabari trembled. She said. Adwo stepped back. Kanto clenched his fists. And Ceci, he fell to one knee, hearing something the others couldn't. He said the earth was crying. Yanxia lifted her staff, she went on, and roots burst from the ground, swirling around the children like protective arms. But even she struggled to hold them back. The Whispering Hollow grew stronger with every heartbeat. What did they do? Kofi whispered anxiously. She smiled gently, as though the moment mattered more than his fear. They stepped forward. All 4 of them. Kofi inhaled sharply. Yes, she whispered. They chose courage together. And when they did, the roots around them glowed faintly, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth. Yasea told each of them to speak aloud the truth they feared most. For the Whispering Hollow fed on unspoken fears. Kofi felt his throat tighten. Adwo said she feared failing those she loved. Kanto said he feared not being strong enough to protect his village. Ceci whispered that he feared the spirits would one day fall silent. And Jabari. Kofi braved that Grandma Alma looked at him with warm eyes. Jabari spoke the truth he had buried deep. I fear that courage will leave me. Kofi felt that fear settle heavy in his chest. He understood it. And when the Whispering Hollow heard their fears spoken aloud, she said, it roared not because they were afraid, but because their honesty weakened it. She tapped her cane. There is power, child, in naming what tries to hide in the dark. The candle flickered again, brighter now. With each confession, the fissure in the earth narrowed. The Whispering Hollow's voice weakened. And finally, when Jabari laid his hand on the ground and whispered a song of the ancestors, the crack sealed shut. Kofi exhaled shakily, but the battle was not over, she warned softly. For a creature like the Whispering Hollow cannot be destroyed, only quieted, only contained. She leaned back in her chair. Yanxia blessed the children. She said the day would come when the darkness would rise again across oceans, across new lands. And the descendants of those brave children would feel the same tug in their hearts. Her eyes rested on Kofi gently, knowingly, and that child, she said, is why our stories matter. They remind the descendants' children like you that courage flows through your blood like a river that never dries. Kofi swallowed, emotion tightening his chest. Jabari walked home as the sun rose. He carried no trophies, no marks of winning a battle, only the knowledge that courage did not belong to him alone. It belonged to all who had come before, and all who would come after. The room fell still. Grandma Alma's voice softened. And that is the second chapter of Jabari's story. Kofi stared at her, his heartbeat slowing, warming. The story felt bigger now, bigger than just one boy, bigger than a village, bigger than time. He whispered, "Grandma, tomorrow, will you tell me more?" She reached out and brushed a thumb gently against his cheek. "If your spirit is ready," she said, "the next chapter will find you." Asterisk understood. Here is chapter 3, approximately 2,000 words, storytelling style, no headings. If you want chapter 4, just say 4, chapter 3, approximately 2,000 words. The morning after the second story felt unusually bright in Willow Bend. The sun rose like a warm drumbeat, slow and steady, letting gold spill across the rooftops. Kids ran down the dirt paths, laughing, chasing each other with sticks or stones or whatever scraps they'd found to turn into adventure. But Kofi felt different. Ever since Grandma Alma started the story of Jabari, the world seemed to hum with something he couldn't name. It was as if the very air carried secrets that only children who listened closely could hear. He kept thinking of the Whispering Hollow, of the 4 children standing on trembling earth, of fears spoken aloud like offerings. He found himself wondering what his deepest fear was, the one he hadn't told anyone, not even himself. He tried to name it as he helped his father haul water from the well, but the thought slipped away like water between fingers. All day he waited for evening, glancing again and again toward Grandma Alma's cabin. When the shadows began to stretch long and soft across the settlement, he finally stood up from the dinner table and told his mother he was going to visit Dot. His mother simply nodded. "Sit close to her tonight," she said gently. "Old stories come when the ancestors want to be heard." Kofi hurried down the path, dust kicking beneath his sandals. Fireflies flickered around him like sparks from a slow-burning fire. When he reached the cabin, the door was again already open. Inside, the room smelled different than before. Less of sage tonight, more of wood smoke, and something he recognized from long ago. Palm oil. It carried him back to stories of the old lands his grandmother sometimes sang about. Tonight felt older than the other nights. Grandma Emma sat in her rocking chair, but the bowl of water by the window was gone. In its place lay a woven mat made from dried grass, patterned with circles and lines that spiraled inward like paths leading to a center. "Sit," she said softly. Kofi sat cross-legged on the mat, which felt somehow warm beneath him, as though another child had been sitting there just moments before. "You're ready for the third part," she said. "The story grows heavier now, and heavier stories need a still heart." Kofi nodded. He wasn't entirely sure his heart was still, but he tried. She breathed slowly, deeply, until even the candle flame seemed to match her rhythm. Then her voice sank into that warm, deep place where stories lived. After the children sealed the Whispering Hollow, she began. Peace returned to the village, but only for a time. You see, darkness never rests completely. It waits, it watches, it listens. Kofi felt the words curl into the corners of the room like waiting shadows. Jabari grew stronger in the days that followed. Yendia had taught each of the four children something small, something simple but powerful. Jabari, she taught the art of listening. She smiled faintly, not to people, to the world. Kofi tilted his head slightly, listening to the quiet between her words. He listened to the wind. She continued, and heard stories of spirits traveling between the trees. He listened to the ground and felt the slow heartbeat of the land. He listened to the rivers and heard laughter from ancestors who once bathed in them. The idea filled Kofi with a kind of longing, a desire to hear more than what his ears normally allowed. But one night, she said, her eyes drifting to the flickering flame, Jabari heard something that made his heart tense. A whisper not from the hollow this time, but from the roots of the baobab. Kofi shivered. It said, "The darkness grows beyond these lands." Jabari didn't understand at first. But the next morning, when he went down to the river to fetch water, he found Adwa already there. She wasn't alone. A woman from another village a village days away stood beside her. The woman's clothes were torn, her palms scraped raw, and her voice trembled as she spoke. Her village, she said, was falling silent, not peaceful silent, not nighttime silent, silence like someone pressing a hand over the world's mouth. The elders there no longer remembered the old stories. The children had stopped dreaming. Even the trees stood stiff as if afraid to sway in the wind. The woman had traveled far to seek help because the nights in her village were growing colder unnaturally so. Fires struggled to stay lit, and people whispered that their ancestors no longer walked with them. Kofi felt his skin prickle. Losing the ancestors? That was the deepest kind of emptiness. When the woman finished speaking, Grandma Emma said, Jabari felt something tighten in his chest. A tug, a pull. The same tug that had drawn him to the baobab tree on the night of the drums. And that night, she continued, the tug became a call. She tapped her cane against the wooden floor. That night, the drums returned. Kofi's breath hitched. They began as faint echoes farther than any drums had ever sounded before. But Jabari heard them. And he wasn't the only one. Adwoa heard them in her dreams. Kanto heard them while carrying water. Ceci heard them through the roots of every tree he touched. The candle flame swayed violently, as if the drums themselves pulsed through the air. The four children came together again, each knowing the meaning without needing to speak it. They were to journey beyond their land into the unknown to discover why another village was losing its ancestral fire. Kofi blinked. They left their homes? Grandma Emma nodded. Courage grows when it is stretched. She went on. Their journey took them through thick forests where the air smelled of moss and river stone. The trees whispered warnings to Ceci. They told him the shadows moved strangely. They crossed red plains where the wind blew so hard it felt like a living spirit pushing them forward. They slept under skies so vast that even Adwoa, bold as she was, felt small beneath them. And all the while, she said softly, the drums continued. Not loud, not urgent, but steady. Calling Dot one evening, after days of walking, they reached the edge of the troubled village. What they saw there made each child halt and fear Dot no fires burned. Not a single one. Windows were shuttered. Doors were locked. The air felt thin, as if the world had forgotten how to breathe. But it was the trees that frightened them most. They were gray. Grandma Amma whispered, not dead, not alive. Gray like laughter drained out of them. Kofi shuddered. Jabari felt the tug in his chest again, this time so strong he nearly fell forward. He stepped toward the village center, where a great stone circle marked the space where ancestors usually gathered to listen to songs. Only now that stone circle was cracked. Cracked? Kofi whispered. Yes, she said. cracked down the middle as though something had pushed up from beneath it. Jabari knelt, pressing his palm to the ground. It felt cold, cold in a way no sun could warm. He remembered Yeshai's warning, what sleeps beneath the earth is never truly gone. As he knelt there, listening with his whole being, he heard it, a murmur, a whisper, not words. Not yet just sound, soft at first. Then rising, surrounding him, curling around him like smoke, and suddenly he understood. The whispering hollow, she said slowly, had traveled. Kofi's heart clenched. But they sealed it. They sealed the place, she said gently, not the presence. The hollow had slipped through the cracks of the world, moving like a slow dream into other lands. Other minds doubt now it lived in the silence of this village. The 4 children stood together in the center of the cracked stone circle. They held hands without speaking, and Jabari felt the warmth of their bravery join his own Adwoa's fierce spirit. Kanto's steady strength, Ceci's quiet wisdom, but the darkness beneath them felt stronger than before. It rose in a trembling wave, pressing cold fog against their ankles. The ground beneath the circle VIBRTE dot, and then a voice emerged, soft at first, then sharper, like a knife made of quiet sound. Ao felt dizzy. He remembered the dream from chapter 1, the towering tree, the rustling leaves whispering his name, the land that felt ancient and familiar, even though he had never seen Africa with his waking eyes. Mama Nala, he whispered, what do I do? Mama Nala stood, her joints cracking like old branches. She pulled back a woven basket sitting in the corner and lifted the cloth covering it. Inside lay a small drum round, hand-carved, stretched with soft hide, decorated with symbols Ao didn't recognize. The symbols glowed. Ao gasped. That's glowing. Mama Nala nodded calmly. This drum has been in your family longer than America has been America. Brought over by your ancestor Kwasi, who hid it in a basket lined with herbs and cloth, so the overseers thought it was just a baby's mat. She lifted the drum with reverence and placed it in Ao's hands. The moment his fingers touched it, the warm glow spread up his arms, into his chest, and up into his throat where a strange feeling rose like a hummingbird, fluttering behind his ribs. Ao gasped and nearly dropped it. It's vibrating. Not vibrating, she corrected. Calling. Ao held the drum close. A rhythm pulsed through it, not random, but steady, old, knowing. It thumped like a heartbeat, like his own heartbeat, like thousands of heartbeats. What does it want me to do? He whispered. Mama Nala smiled slowly. It wants you to remember. Ao licked his lips. Remember what? The song, she said. The song your ancestor whispered to the Atlantic waves so the chorus spirits would follow him here. The song your grandmother hummed while plaiting her hair. The song that hides in your bones every time you run, every time you laugh, every time you dream. Ao felt the drum pulse again. Stronger. It's waking up, he whispered. Yes, Mama Nala said, her eyes shining like she stood on the edge of the past and the present at once. And so are you. A gust of wind slammed against the window. The lamp flickered wildly. Ao nearly jumped out of his skin, but Mama Nala didn't even flinch. Easy now, she murmured. The spirits get excited when a child begins to remember. Ao swallowed hard. Remember what? I still don't know. Mama Nala lifted her hand. Close your eyes. Ao hesitated, but then obeyed. Now breathe, she whispered. Slow, deep. He inhaled. The room smelled different now, earth and smoke, and something sweet like palm wine. Listen. Ao listened up first. He heard the wind outside. Then the faint crackling of the lamp flame. Then his own breath, but beneath those, something else. A low hum. It wasn't coming from Mama Nala. It wasn't coming from the drum. It was coming from inside him. Ao's chest vibrated. His skin tingled. His breath caught. I hear something, he said. Yes, Mama Nala whispered. That is your soul song? Ao felt it swell soft at first, then stronger. Like a memory he had never learned, but had always known. What do I do with it? He asked, voice trembling. Mama Nala placed her hands on his shoulders. You learn it, she said. You master it, and then you follow it. Ao's eyes flew open. Follow it where? To your destiny. But where is that? Mama Nala leaned close, her voice barely more than a breath. The Kora tree. Ao's heart leaped. But the tree is in Africa? Mama Nala smiled strangely, an ancient smile. A knowing smile, a smile older than America itself. Child, she whispered. The tree is closer than you think? Ao swallowed, eyes locked on hers. What does that mean? She tapped his chest. It grows where your courage grows. Another gust of wind struck the house. The drum glowed brighter. The hum in Ao's chest turned into a soft melody. What's happening? He whispered. The beginning, she murmured. Ao clutched the drum tighter. The room felt alive. The shadows moved. The flame stretched, bending toward him. Mama Nala sat back, her expression solemn now. Ao, she said, from this night on, your life will not be simple. You will find truths buried deeper than roots. You will see things most people blind themselves to. You will hear voices carried by winds others ignore. And you must be ready. For what? Ao breathed. Mama Nala closed her eyes. For the night the spirits come for you. The drum thumped once hard. The lamp went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Ao's breath shook. Somewhere in the dark, he heard whispering, familiar, ancient, waiting, and then a leaf arduous tled. Inside the house. Ao held the glowing drum against his chest. Eyes wide, heart racing. And the Kora tree's voice spoke for the first time. Ao. It whispered. Asterisk. Here is chapter 5. Storytelling style. No headings. Deep African-American ancestral roots. About 2,000 words. Full immersion. If you want chapter 6, just say 6. Chapter 5. Story. The darkness inside Mama Nala's house felt alive, thick like a blanket woven from night itself. Ao stood frozen, clutching the drum to his chest as the glow from it spread across the room in faint pulses, like the heartbeat of some ancient creature waking under his skin. The whisper he heard soft as wind through tall grass, till lingered in the air, curling around him like smoke. Ao. He didn't know if the whisper came from inside him, or from the drum, or from somewhere else entirely. All he knew was that it didn't sound human. It carried age, memory, echoes, like it traveled across oceans and centuries before reaching his ears. A faint breath of wind brushed his ear. Ao jumped and spun toward the window, but the shutters were closed. The room still dark, yet he could feel something there, as real as a hand placed on his shoulder. Mama Nala. He whispered. No answer. He swallowed. Mama Nala, where are you? Still nothing. The drum thumped again in his arms, and Ao felt the vibration go straight into his bones. The glow brightened. The shadows around him thinned just enough for him to make out the outline of Mama Nala sitting on the floor, perfectly still. Her head was bowed, her hands resting on her knees, eyes closed. She looked like she was listening to something Ao couldn't hear. Mama? He whispered, stepping closer. She didn't move, didn't even blink. But when Ao got close enough, he saw something strange. A thin line of light, a pale golden thread stretching from her chest to the drum in Ao's arms. Ao's breath caught. The drum pulsed again. The line of light pulsed with it. Mama Nala. What's happening to you? Slowly, as though waking from a deep sleep, she inhaled. Her shoulders lifted. Her eyes opened. But when she looked at Ao, There was something different in her gaze, something that made his skin tingle. Ao, she whispered, don't be afraid. Why aren't the lights back? He asked, voice trembling. She held up a hand, palm outward. The air around her shimmered faintly, like heat rising from a fire. They cannot, she said. Not while the spirits walk. Ao's mouth went dry. Spirits here? She nodded slowly. They came through the drum. They followed the call of your soul song. Ao clutched the drum tighter. Are they dangerous? Mama Nala shook her head. Not to you. They came to guide you. The glow from the drum intensified until the entire room seemed wrapped in amber light. Ao felt warmth washing over him, gentle but powerful, the way sunlight might feel after weeks of rain. Listen, Mama Nala said softly. Listen to what they show you. Ao inhaled shakily and closed his eyes. At first, he heard only silence. Then something soft began to rise like wind whistling through hollow bones. Then another sound layered beneath it, a deeper rumble like feet stomping on earth. Then a rhythm emerged, steady and strong, as though thousands of hands clapped in unison. When Ao opened his eyes, the room was gone. In its place was a wide savanna bathed in moonlight, tall grasses moving like waves. Stars brighter than any he'd ever seen filled the sky, so bright they seemed alive. Shadows danced in circles, and Ao realized they were people, men and women and children dressed in colors he'd only seen in drawings. Cloth wrapped like flowing rivers around their shoulders. He realized he wasn't standing in Mama Nala's house at all. He stood among them. Ao gasped and spun around, but instead of hitting a wall, he saw an endless expanse of land, the kind found in stories of Africa, old Africa, the one his ancestors came from. Mama Nala, he whispered, but she was nowhere. Only the people, their faces glowing with sweat and firelight, their feet pounding against the earth. Drums surrounded him, large ones carved with symbols he recognized from the drum in his hands. Smaller ones slung from shoulders, some played with hands, some with sticks carved like lightning. Bolts. The music reverberated through his chest, until he couldn't tell whether the rhythm came from the drums or his own. Heartbeat. A tall man with skin as dark as rich soil stepped forward. His hair was braided with beads shaped like tiny shells, and around his neck hung a piece of carved ivory. His eyes glowed with a wisdom so deep, Ao felt himself straighten without meaning to. You have come, the man said in a voice that rolled like thunder and whispered like wind at the same time. Ao took a step back. Where am I? The man bowed slightly. Where your blood remembers. Where your spirit was born. Africa, Ao breathed. Yes, the man said. The Africa that lived before the world changed. The Africa your ancestors carried across the ocean when they could carry nothing else. Ao's mouth felt dry. How am I here? The man gestured toward the drum in Ao's arms. That is no ordinary drum. It is a path, a memory, a bridge. Ao swallowed. Who are you? The man smiled gently. I am called Meku, keeper of the Kora tree. Ao's heart thudded. The Kora tree? It's real? Meku stepped aside and motioned for Ao to follow. As Ao walked past him, he felt a strange sensation beneath his feet, warm earth, soft soil, as though the ground itself recognized him. When they crested a small hill, Ao's breath caught in his throat. There it stood. The Kora tree towered into the night sky, branches stretching so wide they seemed to hold up the stars themselves. The trunk was massive, its bark glowing faintly, carved with shimmering symbols that pulsed like veins. Leaves rustled even though there was no wind, each one glimmering like bronze dipped in moonlight. Ao couldn't speak. He could only stare. It's beautiful, he whispered. It is alive, Meku said, and it remembers every soul who carried its song across the sea. including yours. Ao looked down at the drum glowing in his arms. Why does it call to me? Miku's gaze softened. Because your line was chosen. Long ago, one of your ancestors made a promise beneath this tree. A promise that when the time came, one of their descendants would awaken the connection between the old land and the new. Ao felt a chill. What promise? That the memory of who we are would never die, Miku said. Not even if the world tried to bury it. Ao felt tears sting his eyes. But I'm just a kid. Why would the tree choose me? Miku tilted his head. Children hear truth more clearly than grown people who have forgotten how to listen. Ao couldn't argue with that doubt. He looked up at the kora tree again. Its branches shimmered, and a low hum vibrated through the ground, through the air. Through Ao's body. You feel it, Miku said quietly. The calling. Ao nodded. Then step forward, Miku said. Place your hand upon its trunk. Ao hesitated. The tree looked powerful, too powerful. What if it burned him? What if it pushed him away? What if he wasn't worthy? But he remembered Mama Nala's words. It grows where your courage grows. Ao lifted his chin, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the tree. The closer he got, the louder his heartbeat became. The ground vibrated. The drum in his arms hummed. His fingers tingled. He reached out, his palm pressed against the bark. Shock of warmth shot up his arm like lightning, but not painful, more like someone waking him from a long sleep. His eyes squeezed shut as memories not his own flooded his mind. A woman with a baby tied to her back, singing a soft lullaby beneath the tree. A group of warriors dancing with spears as drums thundered. Children racing between the roots. Elders sitting in a circle, telling stories of ancestors and spirits. The sound of waves crashing against a ship's hull. Hands bound in chains. Tears falling. Songs rising. Laughter returning. Dreams whispered to future generations. Ao cried out, overwhelmed. The vision swirled faster, merging into a bright light that filled his entire body. He felt something awaken inside him, something old, something strong, something that felt like home. The tree's voice, soft as breath, echoed inside him. Ao. Child of remembrance. Your spirit is the bridge. Ao gasped. The bridge? You will carry what others forgot. You will remind what has been buried. You will restore what was lost. I don't know how. Ao shouted. The tree hummed, and the glow around him softened. You will learn. Suddenly the earth shook. A low rumble spread across the savannah. Ao stumbled backward. What's happening? He cried. Miku's expression turned grave. They know you've awakened. Who? Those who wish the old stories to fade. Those who feed on forgetfulness. Dark shapes appeared on the horizon, tall, thin, shifting as though made of smoke. Their eyes glowed with cold white light. They moved toward the tree in slow, predatory steps. Ao's stomach lurched. What are they? Miku placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Shadow eaters, born from broken memories and eroded histories. They have waited centuries for the kora tree's connection to weaken. But I brought it back, Ao whispered. Yes, Miku said. And that is why they are coming. The shadows grew closer, their forms bending unnaturally, stretching like nightmares. Ao's heart raced as he backed away from the tree. What do I do? Mama Nala didn't teach me how to fight spirits. Beku knelt so their faces were level. Ao, listen. You were not chosen to fight with fists. You were chosen to fight with memory. Ao stared at him, confused. Memory? Beku nodded. The drum, child. Play it. Ao nearly dropped it. I don't know how. Yes, Beku said softly. You do. The shadows were nearly upon them. Ao, Beku said urgently, close your eyes. Feel your soul song. Let it guide your hands. Ao squeezed his eyes shut. He felt the drum thrum beneath his fingers, felt the song inside his chest rise like a tide, felt the core tree's roots tremble. Under the earth, he inhaled. He exhaled dot and he struck the drum. The sound that erupted wasn't like any drum he'd ever heard. It wasn't a beat, it was a voice, a story, a memory. Each strikes in a wave of golden light across the savannah. Each beat echoed with the strength of ancestors. The shadow eaters shrieked, stumbling backward as the light hit them. Ao struck again and again. His hands moved faster, guided by something older than he understood. The shadows twisted, weakened, and began dissolving like mist in sunlight. Meko shouted over the rising sound, "Yes, Ao." This is the power they tried to silence. Ao played harder. The drum glowed so brightly he could barely see. His arms moved on their own. The ground shook with every beat. One last pulse of light burst. Outward dot silence fell. The shadows were gone. Ao dropped to his knees, breathless. The drum dimmed, the light fading back to a warm glow. Meku approached him slowly, eyes shining. "You saved us." Ao looked at him, sweaty, exhausted, confused. "Did I really do all that?" Beku nodded. "You protected the memory. And in doing so, you protected your people past and future." Ao swallowed. "What happens now?" The world blurred. The sky rippled like fabric pulled taut. "You return," Meku said. "Your journey is not done. The tree has awakened in you, but your purpose lies in the world you came from." Ao gasped as the ground dissolved under him. The drum tightened in his grip. "But I don't know what to do in my world yet." "You will," Beku said as his voice faded. "The spirits will guide you. Mama Nala will guide you, and your own courage will guide you most of all." The world vanished. Ao jolted, stumbling backward into darkness, then the spark of light, a breath, a trembling flame. The oil lamp in Mama Nala's house flickered back to life. Ao stood only a few feet from where he'd started. The mat beneath his feet, the worn wooden walls, the warm smell of herbs, everything exactly as before, everything except Ao. Mama Nala exhaled slowly, her eyes soft. "You saw it," she whispered. Ao clutched the drum, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Yes." Mama Nala reached out and wiped one tear gently with her thumb. "Then, child," she said, "your real journey begins now." The morning after the storm felt like the world had been washed clean. The tall oaks dripped with silver beads of water, and the ground still held the cool breath of night. Dawn spread across the sky in long strokes of gold and rose, and for the first time in weeks, the village's heartbeat felt steady, as if the land itself exhaled with relief. Little Kofi woke before the others. Even now, he felt the night's power moving through him, the way the drum of his ancestors had sounded inside his chest, the way the wind had bent to his voice, the way the veil between worlds had opened so softly that he could still taste its edges. He stepped outside the small wooden house and lifted his face to the sky. The world smelled like wet earth, pine, and the smoke of last night's torches. And beneath all that, something else, a peace so thick it felt like velvet pressing against his skin. Behind him, the door creaked and Mama Emma stepped out, leaning on her carved cane. She wore a thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders, but her eyes looked brighter than the sunrise. "You feel it too," she whispered. Kofi nodded. He didn't have words, not yet. The feeling was too big, too wide. Something ancient had passed through him, into him, around him. He could still hear the ancestors humming in the back of his mind, like distant singing carried on the wind. Mama Amma placed a hand on his shoulder. "It is not every day a child stands in two worlds and returns with both feet on the earth." Kofi swallowed. "Grandmama, last night, did I really do everything everyone said I did?" She tilted her head. You walked the path the others feared. You called the wind when the night wanted to swallow us. You reminded the old spirits of our promise, the one our people carried all the way from Mother Africa. You did not only do it, you were meant to. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the fragile amazement of someone who had waited many years for this moment. Before Kofi could answer, a loud laugh shook the air like a fallen drum. Old Papa Mosi came hobbling down the dirt path with his crooked hat tilted sideways and his walking stick tapping the ground in quick, excited beats. "The child of the storm is awake," he boomed. "Let the day begin." Kofi blushed as other villagers emerged from their homes, young women with scarves tied around their hair, men stretching after a long night, elders walking slowly but with soft smiles. They gathered around him with looks of pride, respect, and something deeper, a quiet recognition. Kofi wasn't just a child of their community anymore. He was a bridge dot as the sun climbed higher. Preparations began for the great feast. This feast wasn't just a celebration, it was a binding, a gathering of old promises. Women carried iron pots to the center of the clearing, filling them with okra, onions, smoked fish, and long strips of cassava. Elders hammered wooden stakes into the earth to prepare the fire pit. Children raced back and forth, collecting firewood, their laughter dancing through the air like sunlight. And everywhere Kofi went, people touched his head, clapped his shoulders, or pressed his hands between theirs. "You saved us. You reminded us, the old spirits will bless your path." He felt heavy and light at the same time, like someone had draped a royal cloth across his shoulders without warning. But there was one person he needed to see more than anything. Talia. She had been the first to believe him, the first to follow him into the storm, the first to stand beside him when the sky turned wild and the spirit wolf stepped out of lightning. He found her near the riverbank, washing bowls in the cold, rushing water. Her long braids were tied behind her back, and she hummed a soft rhythm, the same melody her mother used to sing when Talia was very little. When she heard Kofi's footsteps, she glanced up with a grin. "So the Storm King decided to join us common folk," she teased. Kofi scoffed, though warmth crept into his face. "I'm no king." "No," she said, flicking water at him. "But you're something." He sat beside her, letting the river's chill nip at his fingertips. "I don't know what happens now," he murmured. "Everyone keeps looking at me like I'm supposed to know something big." Talia shrugged. "Maybe you do. Maybe you will. Maybe you already did it." She dipped another bowl into the river, scrubbing it with practiced swirls. "People expect things from heroes, even little ones." "I'm not a hero," Kofi said softly. Talia raised an eyebrow. "You faced a spirit wolf bigger than Papa Mosi's ego." "It just wanted to be heard," Kofi said. "Wanted someone to remember its story." She smiled. "Then you gave it what it needed." And that's what heroes do. When they returned to the village clearing, the feast had begun. Fires roared, and the smell of herbs, stew, and roasted corn filled the air until even the trees seemed to lean closer. Drummers sat in a wide circle, beating rhythms that seemed to rise from the earth itself, deep, warm, old. These were not songs made for dancing alone. They were ancestral songs, songs carried from Africa across oceans, songs African elders whispered in America long ago so their people would remember who they were. The drums did not tell time. They told memory. People swayed, children jumped, elders closed their eyes as if seeing distant plains and rivers from the motherland. Mama Ama rose to speak, not with a cane for support this time, but with a straight back and a strong voice. "We have been reminded," she began, "that the old ways are not gone. They live in us, in our breath, in our walking, in the soil beneath our feet. Last night, the spirits came hungry for truth, and our child," she nodded toward Kofi, "fed them with courage. The crowd hummed with agreement. But courage, she continued, is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning. She gestured for Kofi to step forward. His heart fluttered. His feet felt heavy. Yet he walked into the center, where the drummers beat soft to a gentle pulse. Mama Ama placed a small leather pouch in his hands. It smelled faintly of smoke and earth. "This was your ancestor, Quames," she said. He carried it when he was taken across the great water. Inside are the sacred seeds of his village. He believed someone in the future would plant them again, not in soil, but in spirit. Kofi clutched the pouch to his chest. He had seen it before, high on Mama Ama's shelf, but it had never been his. Until now. "Keep them," she said. "Grow into them. They will teach you the strength of your line." As night fell and stars spread across the sky like scattered shells, the feast became a dance. Young men stomped the ground, moving in patterns older than any map. Women spun, skirts swirling like painted flames. Children copied everything, stumbling with laughter. Talia grabbed Kofi's wrist. "Come on. I don't know the steps." "No one's born knowing," she laughed. "Dance your own story." And so he did. His feet found the rhythm naturally, as if the drums were tapping inside his bones. He moved through the firelight, through shadows, through the warmth of the people who loved him. For a moment he felt the spirit wolf's gaze again, not threatening, not wild, but approving, watching, waiting, proud leader. When the last flames turned into glowing embers, Kofi slipped away from the crowd and walked toward the whispering trees. The night was warm, the sky a soft blue-black bowl dotted with stars. He sat on a fallen log and opened the small leather pouch. Inside were 3 seeds, dark, smooth, and warm from his hands. But when he held them closer to the moonlight, he saw faint markings carved into each one like tiny symbols. They pulsed gently as if breathing. A soft breeze brushed his cheek. It carried with it the voices of the ancestors, low and melodic. "We walk with you. You are not alone." Kofi closed the pouch carefully. He wasn't scared. Not anymore. The world felt wide, full of mysteries, challenges, old songs, ancient promises, and he was part of them now. Behind him, footsteps approached. Mama Ama lowered herself beside him with a quiet sigh. "Do you feel ready for what comes next?" she asked. Kofi thought for a long moment. "I don't know what comes next." "No child ever does," she said. "But you know who walks with you. That is enough." He leaned his head against her shoulder. "Will the spirits come again?" "They always come," she whispered. "Sometimes as storms. Sometimes as dreams. Sometimes as people we meet on the road. But remember, your heart is your drum. If you keep it steady, you will always know where home is." Kofi nodded. The night wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Fireflies drifted through the bush, blinking like tiny wandering stars. Somewhere deep in the forest, an owl sang a long, soothing note. Kofi felt sleep tugging at his eyes, heavy and gentle. Before he drifted off completely, Mama Ama kissed his forehead. "Your story is only beginning," she said. "But tonight you rest. You earned that." And as Kofi closed his eyes, he felt the ancestors circling him, warm and familiar, like hands weaving a protective cloak. He felt the spirit wolf curl at a distance, its silver glow pulsing softly in that peaceful silence. He understood something without needing words. The journey wasn't about power. It wasn't about magic. It was about remembrance, memory carried through generations. Stories carried through storms, courage carried through time. And so, wrapped in ancient whispers and the soft hum of a village that loved him, Kofi finally drifted into sleep, and the land, both old and new, slept with him.